Nonprofit and philanthropic leaders devote their lives to the service of others, but sometimes they need a little help. Kristine Michie has been deep in the work and the play of helping changemakers grow their impact for decades. So whether you're ladling soup at a local shelter or attending a UN peace conference, you need to find the balance between the heavy work and a light touch so you don't burn out. And Kristine believes play is at the center of that. Welcome to the PlayFull Podcast, bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the PlayFull Podcast. We are bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. And today, Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart is with us, and we are in the early stages of a wonderful new series called Thoughts and Prayers, where we are looking at the intersection of faith, politics, change making, and specifically interfaith conversations and how they might get us out of the situation we're in. So Dr. Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kristine, for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. I enjoyed our time we had in our prep call, and I'm learning more about you and really inspired by you already. So let me ask you, first off, I was thinking there's an adage, right? Don't talk about, like, I feel like we heard from our parents, don't talk about religion or politics. You want to keep things civil. And you're all about talking about religion and politics. Let me ask you this. Which one came first? And how do you blend them both? And how do you navigate the world with those two sensibilities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think religion came first for me. I don't remember a time where I wasn't active in a Christian congregation. My grandmother would come and pick my brother and me up every Sunday morning. And we would spend all day between Sunday school and worship service, and then the post-worship meal, and then the afternoon service. I spent a lot of time in church. And then during the week, I went to a Christian academy, a private Christian school. So I was swimming in religious life from a very early age. My political sensibilities, though, weren't really shaped or refined, I guess, until I was in college. And it figures because that was my break from the kind of religious bubble that I was raised in. Once I got to school, I was like, oh, nobody's checking for me to go to church every week. Nobody's checking for me. I'm not going to go. But then I met other Black people of faith who were very politicized, and they saw no contradictions between their faithfulness and their political activity. And so they modeled for me a way to not cut off my nose to spite my face, right? That I could be both deeply religious and deeply engaged politically.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. I love that. And it's calling to mind some of my own history. And I'm thinking about similarly, I grew up Catholic, and every Sunday, all Sunday, and come breakfast, church, then out to lunch with people from church and all that. And then when I went to college, I'd stopped going. And it was many, many years until I got back into it. And it was when I heard, it was during the first Gulf War. And I remember overhearing someone in my office talking about an Episcopal church they were going to, where there was a gay female preacher preaching against the war. And I'm like, wait, just okay, we got gay, we got female, married also, and preaching against the war. I was like, I gotta go check that out. I didn't think all that could happen in the building called a church. And so and I started dabbling again after that. And so I can relate to that happy surprise that those things could all be housed physically in a place and housed physically inside me.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I believe the, you can't be it if you don't see it thing. I think people blaze trails all the time, things they've never seen before. But for real, it was true for me that I couldn't imagine, certainly being a religious leader, but just being um, a, a woman who was asking what would be considered indecent questions in the church, right? I had to see somebody do that and not get, struck by lightning or something
Yeah, yeah.
to believe that it was possible for me to live that way as well.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I often do this because I get so excited to start talking. I skip over a little bit of bio. And so, for those that don't know you, I know many that do know you are going to be just so happy to have heard your voice already. And for those who don't, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio that you shared with me. Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, a daughter of Detroit. So, we're going to have to talk about that because that's the first thing you say about yourself in your bio. So, that's got to be important. Is a Black queer preacher, teacher, strategist, and justice advocate. You have a couple academic affiliations. You're an adjunct professor of theology and religious studies at Villanova. You're the theologian in residence at the Black Cultural Center at Swarthmore College. And then you work for an organization called Political Research Associates. Now, that could be, I mean, those three words don't give much of a clue or a hint.
Right.
But what I understand, and from what you've shared with me additionally, is that it is a social justice research and strategy center devoted to supporting organizations, civic leaders, journalists, and social sectors, building a more just, inclusive, democratic society. But specifically, and you don't tuck this away, you are monitoring and challenging the U.S. right wing
Yeah.
as a threat to those things we were just talking about. And
Right.
you're also a double ordained minister, both at the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and the United Church of Christ. So, folks, that's what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about this beautiful duality where Naomi is spending her time talking about the things we're not supposed to talk about, right? And I'm curious about how all these different affiliations you've got and affinities that you got. How are you showing up today, and what's really making things where are you finding the most satisfaction, and where do you think you're having the most impact with all these different roles?
First of all, let me say, my vocational life has developed out of my commitment to this kind of biblical commandment to love God with my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength. So I see that as my body, right? I'm a teacher. The classroom is a ministry space for me because it is me using my mind to critically think through my faith commitments and the implications of my faith commitments for the larger world. And I want to accompany students as they do the same thing. So teaching theology is part of loving God with my mind, right? Loving God with my heart and soul. This I see as my kind of ordained ministry call, right? It is journeying with congregations as we ask, really, in my view, indecent and irreverent questions about life and faith. It is the rituals, right? Marrying people and burying people and baptizing babies. I mean, all the things that make up congregational life, right? And then loving God with my strength, my body, that to me is the politics, right? It is, where am I investing my time, my body to make the world anew? That to me is politics. Politics is about the distribution of resources, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm involved in politics because I care about equitable and fair and just distribution of resources. All of that is a part of my faithfulness following the greatest commandment. So that's what's underneath it all for me. In terms of what's like more impactful or where I feel like I'm, you know, successful, I really have a hard time separating it all out, right? Because say on a typical Wednesday, I might do a webinar on what is authoritarianism And how is authoritarianism what we're experiencing more and more in the United States?
Yeah.
And then I might have a pastoral care call with a friend of mine who wants to talk to me about whatever's going on in her life. And I want to speak life into her. I want to let her know that she can make it through, right? And then in the evening, I'm in the classroom at Villanova thinking about theologies of suffering and how what we think about suffering and God's role in suffering impacts how we respond to human suffering, right? So I sort of see it all connected, right? And I think part of the issue is the separation. Like you said right at the top, we were taught these two things cannot be present in the same conversation, right? But how much more could we be more kind, more compassionate could we be if we saw all of these things connected, right? If we saw people's ability to eat and go to the doctor and get a college education as connected to my salvation, I'll use that term in a Christian context, right? Which is connected to what I learn, how I'm socialized in school, in the academy, right? So I think that these days I am working with people of faith on developing theological courage, moral courage, and political acumen so that we can do what we need to do to right the wrong things that many people in our society are experiencing.
It's beautiful, so beautiful. And when anything is, captured in any one of us, the continuity is us, right? All the through lines that run through you that you've just shared with us. When we started this series, so folks, it's called Thoughts and Prayers, which is kind of a making a nod to that phrase that we often hear, especially after there's been a tragedy, especially a man-made tragedy, sometimes the natural ones, but often it's after a mass shooting or one of these things. And we feel like the officials and in front of the camera, like, don't really know what to say. They say that, which is sort of diluted. I think thoughts and prayers are actually both really significant things. Thoughts are important, prayers are important, but it's become this, like, it feels like it's been said so often without action following, at least our perception of that it just is like a throwaway. So I've been curious about how thoughts and prayers can make us more effective politically, can make us more effective change makers. And I got to tell you, Naomi, when the first person said God on the podcast, in this series a few months ago, in a recording, and when somebody said Jesus, I was thinking, if you would have told me 2 years ago when I started this, we were going to be talking about God and Jesus on the podcast, I would have been like, no, probably not. We're probably not going to do that, right? That even in me felt like, well, that's a different thing than this. And my own journey and conversations I've been having, more and more people started saying, what are we, especially on the progressive left, what are we leaving out? What tool are we not using that we could be, both for our own personal sustenance and the ability to reach out to others? So I'm curious about how you've got such a full toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, I say all the time, voting is an act of faith. Now, we might not be thinking about it in the theistic sense, or you might not believe in God. You might be an atheist or an agnostic and you still vote. But faith is simply moving in a way that presupposes something that you can't currently see or you aren't currently experiencing. And so my vote for this is my belief that, this is going to come to pass, right? It's not here yet, but I'm acting in a way that presumes that the future could be different, right? And so, I see engagement in the political sphere again as, an act of faith, or at least an act of hope, right? And I think hope is a discipline like that you must practice every day. It to me is a spiritual discipline,
Yeah.
right? So again, I don't draw these lines. Now there's organized religion and then there's faith.
Mm-hmm.
I honor that those two things might not be the same for people. They may not have experienced faith in an organized religion setting, right? Acknowledge that. Um, so so the tools of faith, first of all, imagination, right? Somebody has to conceive of it first in their minds before it is concretized,
Yeah.
right? And so I feel like in faith settings in particular, we are invited to stimulate our imagination,
I,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Imagination. So glad you brought that up. That has come up, as you might expect, many times in these
Mm,
conversations over these last couple of years. And it also occurs to me that the folks who've been on the podcast, and I think probably most or many that are listening who are full-time social justice actors and change makers, by definition are people of faith, hope, and imagination, because you wouldn't devote your life to this and go to work each day, some days with no measurable result, quote unquote, if you didn't have faith that it was worth doing again, and you couldn't imagine that things were going to get better, which is so
right,
vital, especially right now.
right. And, when I talk to people of faith who feel hopeless or despairing in these times, like what can be done? What difference can I make? I say to them, don't surrender the tools of your faith to folks who would use those tools against you,
Yeah.
right? Somebody's imagining a world where I can't be married to my wife anymore, or my kid can't, experience college education, right? So know that, I think faithfulness gives us language, gives us tools, gives us ritual,
Yeah.
right? That help in, as you say, changing the world.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't surrender those tools to people who would use those tools as weapons against
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. I absolutely, the moral imagination that we're called to right now, I think should be kind of our top of the list every day. And you're right, there are people imagining and guess what? Successfully executing on some of
Right.
these dreams they had about how they think it should be. So we
That's right.
better match it, right?
That's right.
We better we better stay vibrant in our dreams, in our thinking. I want to ask you about, they have this only one letter, different, play and pray.
Mm.
Tell me about the intersection in your life, between praying and playing, and where does this work? How do you stay playful as you study the U.S. right wing, right? As you study these folks imagining and working against these values, how
Mhm.
do you stay playful and prayerful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think for me, I had to really transform my imagination about God.
Mm,
I grew up, I mean, they taught us that it was a very serious
mm,
endeavor. Prayer was, you had to get somewhere by yourself, go inside the closet, get on your knees, close your eyes. You got to say these words, right? And the older I got, the more I would say maybe reckless I got with my prayers, right? Then if this really is just a conversation with God, and God can handle my questions, my frustration, my rage, then sometimes I'm joking with God.
mm.
Sometimes I'm like, God, where are you? Are you asleep? Did you oversleep? Um thinking about prayer, not as, I'm not saying it's unserious, but it doesn't need to be
Mhm.
formal and rigid and prescriptive, right? Prayer is simply my attempt to commune with something larger than myself. And I also think of prayer as a two-way conversation. So I was taught to pray. You say these words, hop up off your knees, and then go about your business. There was never any time to just stay there and listen for what comes back,
Yeah.
right? Sit there in the silence and allow the universe, allow the creator to speak back to you, right? So prayer also involves deep listening, uh, which I think of as a, I don't know if playful is the word, but it's certainly countercultural,
Yeah.
right? To just sit and listen. We live in an environment where you're supposed to always be producing, always be hustling, always be live on social media, always be, right? The idea that you could just sit and listen, allow nature to talk back to you,
Mhm.
right? Allow seems to me to be very countercultural. And in that way, it feels fun because it's
Yeah.
subversive.
Right.
It's subversive, right? Um, I think the other thing is what constitutes prayer is different for me now. Like prayer can be me listening to a podcast.
Mhm.
That could be a prayerful activity. Prayer can be me at a live concert of my favorite band or musician, right? Um, so seeing all of that as sacred activity,
Yeah.
even though I'm having fun,
Yeah.
right? That's the place in my spiritual life I want to be.
Yeah. That's making me think about Latasha Brown, who has Black Girl Joy and the efforts around Joy to the Polls and things like that. Like they bring in
Mm,
the celebration and the singing and the dancing to the polling place and that intersection of
yeah,
all of that. Um, we're going to ice cream break in just a minute, but before that, let me make sure that people understand the kind of the products and services and offerings of PRA, Political Research Associates. What can people call you all for? What kind of help can we get from PRA?
sure. So PRA has cultivated over 40 years expertise about the far right. So say you hear people talking about Christian nationalism or white Christian nationalism. You hear people saying things like, we are in rising authoritarian times, right? You hear people say, this is approaching fascism. I mean, you want to understand that and the threat that those things pose. PRA has developed an analysis about those things and can translate that analysis for you and your folk, your people. Um, if you want to know the facts and figures, the names and the dates, right? The history, the timeline of how we got here and who did what to whom, we have that intel as well. And then what we say is, all right, take our analysis, build some consensus around, okay, yeah, this does sound like what's going on.
Mhm.
And then use that analysis to develop a plan of action, right? So we help organizations design strategy so they can fight back against some of these anti-democratic
Mhm.
forces. So that's what we do. We take intel, turn that into analysis and insight, and then we turn that analysis and insight into strategy that leads to action,
Yeah.
right? So that's what PRA does. I work with a bunch of nerds. I'm right at home working with a bunch of nerds who care about the state of the world and want to put their brains to use for that kind of revolution.
And Reverend Naomi, would a customer of this be everything from a neighborhood group of folks who just kind of realize they have some common concerns and they want to know what they can do, up to formal and organized 501c3 organizations, or everything in between?
At everything in between. We've done work with local groups who want to understand, okay, so how is authoritarianism in our backyard specifically? Like, we're not talking about Washington, D.C., we're not talking about in our backyard, right? So we do that kind of local mapping, right? Journalists
Mm.
often use our research as a source as they try to understand and tell the story in the media about what's going on, right? Of course, like you say, formal 501c3 organizations that are in this space certainly use our work. So everybody from the layperson to the activists, the professional activists, and everybody in between.
Great. And so if I'm just a listener right now and I'm curious, just going on your website, I'm going to find resources to just make myself smarter and answer some of those questions that we didn't think we were going to be asking ourselves, right? That are we now living under an authoritarian regime? Are we headed towards, or are we in fascism? Some of those questions that are popping into our minds, unfortunately, now for the first time, many times for us, have a place to go to get some of those answers.
Yes, you can go to politicalresearch.org, see all of our writing and what we've published there. You can also go to
Yes,
religiondispatches.org.
please. I wanted to talk about that. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, this is a separate publication that PRA, Political Research Associates, maintains. And it's kind of your daily digest, your daily newspaper for all things kind of American religion, right? People, everyday people write pieces for Religion Dispatches. Before I came to PRA, had published on Religion Dispatches. And then, experts and scholars of religion and people who we, are in ivory towers also write for Religion Dispatches. So really accessible platform. And you might want to contribute. That's the other thing. So we welcome people to pitch us. You want to write something about what's going on in your neck of the woods? Let Religion Dispatches publish it.
I love it. I'm gonna read to everybody here from what I got off the web about Religion Dispatches. Offers a new way to think about how religion works in and on American culture and politics. Religion Dispatches is not a religious publication. We are a publication about religion, written for anyone who wants to better understand how religion shapes our lives and our politics. Love it. What a great thing. And I love it. I love that you're using the old word newspaper. Yeah. Like it could be like, it's like, remember how we picked up the newspaper because we knew it was going to give us a few things we were maybe looking for and a lot of things we weren't expecting because we just sat there and our eyes would just kind of, move from article to article. And this will be all the subject matter will be around religion and its intersection as a part of American life.
That's it.
Fantastic. All right. Please go get your ice cream. And I'm going to just remind folks about our ice cream sponsor. So Taharka Brothers is our ice cream sponsor. They are based in Baltimore, Maryland. They ship their ice cream nationwide. I haven't, this is not scientific, but most of the people on the podcast have said this is the best ice cream they've ever had. And then there's a couple flavors in particular that people seem particularly fond of. We'll see what Reverend Naomi comes back here with. And the reason it's a fun mystery is when you order the nationwide delivery, you get six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pints come in a hot pink box that lands on your it is just way too fun. I want to mention also they're a social enterprise, which means they're a double bottom line business. They're both giving back to the community and creating a great product. And they are employee owned, which I also love. So it's just a bunch of awesome. Okay, here we go. So what'd you choose, Naomi?
I have the cookie dough.
Oh yeah.
Flavor. And I cheated a little bit and tasted it before. So I was like, yeah, this is the one I want to eat.
Oh, good.
While we talk.
Well, and if you haven't gotten to the chunky dough part yet, your spoon's going to hit a chunk. And I got to tell you guys, Taharka does not spare on these chunks. Like their cookie and coffee flavor, like has practically entire Oreos, like full cookie pieces in there. It's so good. I've been on a little run here with Caramel Crunch, which is my carton, salted caramel ice cream with chocolate covered honeycomb toffee. I mean, they didn't even stop. They just kept going. And then this, and then this.
Right.
How's your first bite?
Yeah, great. I'm a little bit of an ice cream snob. And this is really good ice cream.
Thank you. I really, I mean, any ice cream is good ice cream, but then there are those of us that eat a lot of it. It sounds like you might be like me, one of those. When it's particularly good, you got to give it a shout out. And were you home when the ice cream arrived?
I was like,
Fun, right?
I guess I forgot. I knew it was coming and then forgot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is that? The ice cream. Yes.
And it guys, it'll sit on your porch for a few hours. It's packed with some really nice kind of dry ice and everything. I will tell you, I've had a couple of guests who were gone for the weekend. It won't last over a 3-day weekend.
Oh no.
We have to start over.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when we're eating ice cream, I love to ask this question: what's the scoop, Naomi, on how you came to care? An early memory as I suspect early, but maybe not. When you shared a little bit already, but like when you had a sense the world is bigger than just you, maybe just you and your family, and that you've got a role to play and you feel some sense of responsibility to be an engaged citizen with an eye towards how to make things better and better for others.
Mm-hmm. I've got 2 core memories. One, 2nd grade, one of my classmates was diagnosed with leukemia. 2nd grade. Christian school, private Christian school. And my classmate happened to be in the alphabet such
By
that
your
they
name.
sat next to me. And it really formed me as it relates to the tyranny of human suffering, right? Like my classmate, the illness imprisoned him. And I just thought, God, what a, and we would pray and pray and pray, and he would get sicker and sicker and sicker. And so it raised for me the question of, is prayer sufficient? Right? To your point about thoughts and prayers earlier, right? Like prayer seems wholly insufficient. Now, my classmate died before the end of our 2nd grade year.
Wow.
So that was also like the first funeral I went to. So that kind of tenderized my heart to the pain and grief of loss, right? And the frustration sometimes of theologies that invite me to like bypass, step over the ruins to get to God has a plan. Well, wait a minute. Did God plan for this 8-year-old to die? I mean, he suffered and died, Kristine. Like, so I would say that tenderized my heart.
Yeah.
And much of my ministry has been concerned with how we manage grief and loss. I really think if we knew how to grieve collectively, right? If we knew how to like lean into the pain and loss and not try to avoid it, it's part of the human experience, then maybe we wouldn't hurt each other so, right? So that's one formative experience. And then got to high school and met people who were friends who were out as queer folk in high school. And this is 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, now I know that they told me that these folk were, I mean, this is before I would admit to myself that I am also queer, right? They said that these folk are, but like, this is my good friend. This is my friend who would give me a ride home. This was what, and transformational because it, first of all, confronted me with the question, what kind of Christian do you want to be? Are you going to further transmit the same theology that you inherited, even though reality is an affront to that, right? Reality shows you something different. So what kind of Christian will you be? And then 2, who else is vulnerable? Who else have I been told are not
Doesn't count. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so those two things. So by the time I got to college, I was really interested in relieving suffering,
Mm,
relieving human suffering, and in providing refuge
mm,
and sanctuary for folks who have been exiled
mm. Wow.
from Christian community,
Yeah.
right? So, and only in hindsight can I see the power of these stories and how they impacted me, but
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to
Yeah.
have had those experiences.
Wow. And as is often the case when I ask that question and people share those early memories, I suspect there could be a whole range of, and in some cases, an opposite reaction. You could have thought, well, God abandoned this little playmate friend of mine, so then I don't believe in God, right? I mean, it could have gone another way. And so you were blessed with and probably supported in having the thoughts you had. You probably came home with some questions and probably got good counsel from your loving family around some of these things. I was sharing this with a friend the other day that I recently had, and I have had so few of these really in my life. Like this, I had a moment of, Naomi, it didn't even last 5 minutes, maybe it didn't even last three, but I had a moment where like I was so despondent about the state of things in the world that I for a minute was like, how could there be a God? And
Hmm.
I I sat there and I know that's not an uncommon, but I'd never had that feeling before. So
Hmm.
so I sat there for a minute and I was like, well, now I'm screwed. Like, well, like, so what does that do for me? It's saying there's
Hmm.
like, it doesn't unlock another set of solutions, right? It
Sure.
leaves me just abandoned and kind of solo.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, I'm back in believing. I don't have to understand. But I certainly, in that moment that I gave myself to think, well, I don't believe, maybe I can't believe because I don't see the evidence that I want to see that what I, the it's not, I don't understand how these bad things, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, but then I was like, oh, I don't want to be without this. Even if it sometimes feels insufficient and confusing, I need it.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite books
Mm,
is called Listening for God.
mm.
It's by the Reverend Dr. Renita Weems. She was the first Black woman to get a PhD in Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible.
Ooh.
She says in Listening for God, it's sort of like a journal. It reads
Mm,
like a journal.
mm.
She said one day she realized that she prays not because she believes, but in order to believe.
Oh,
Right? Doesn't
yes.
that changes it, right? It's
Yes.
like I don't have to be certain.
Yeah.
I just have to be faithful,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I don't have to be certain. And so much of religion can do harm when we work from an absolutist
Mm,
or place of certainty. Like
right.
that you know, even when evidence is presented to the contrary,
Yeah.
right? Like transgender people exist,
Mm, mm-hmm.
have always
Yeah.
existed, right? Doing great things, right?
Yeah.
Just living a human life, right? In the face of that evidence, we still want to say something
Mm-hmm.
theologically, I think, abhorrent
Mm-hmm.
about trans people. Like, what is so? We go through these rituals, these motions, so that we can believe,
Yeah. Well,
not necessarily because we already believe.
yeah,
Mhm.
and as I share it with you now, and this is just the second time I have, like I mentioned it to my husband, and I'm thinking my faith is actually stronger having gone through that little moment
There you go.
because I was like, well, yeah, and I need it, want it more than I realized when I was just taking it for granted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. That's right.
And, and like we were talking about all of our change maker colleagues, right? We we go each day in an act of faith, right? That my
Right.
effort today is contributing. My effort today is making, I may not be able to see the butterfly wing effect of it, but I believe in and have faith that is all a part of it and I'm a part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I got to hear how you, oh wait, we didn't talk about Detroit. We can't skip that over. So we got to represent whatever you want to tell us about your love of that city, which seems to me, um, from an outside perspective is getting, hopefully to last a while, another round of love. And I hope it's extended. Tell us about growing up there. Tell us about your time there now.
Yeah. Detroit is a very proud city.
Yeah.
Right? Detroiters are proud to be Detroiters, despite the, you know, the whispering, the joking, the bad rap that Detroit gets from people who have never stepped foot inside the city, by the way. Um, Despite all of this, Detroiters are proud to be from Detroit. So I have that blood running through my veins. Like, yeah, we might be an underdog, overlooked, neglected, counted out, right? But we're here. We are working. We're making family. We're having fun. We, you know, uh, very proud. And I also have the experience of seeing political leadership that looked like me,
Mm.
right? Having teachers who looked like me, right? Having neighbors who look like me, going to a historically Black church, right? There's something to be said for seeing your own self
Mm-hmm.
mirrored in positions of leadership and positions of power. The everyday working folk look like you. The people who live in the mansions and the stuff look like you, right? So also a kind of racial pride, a gender
Mm.
pride, like um, was instilled in me in Detroit. And then I have the frustration and the resentment about, folks thinking they can prescribe for Detroit what Detroit needs
Mm-hmm.
without talking to Detroiters,
Yeah.
or who can kind of take advantage of Detroit's, ups and downs, or downs, the valley
Mm-hmm.
experience that Detroit has had in recent years, to destroy neighborhoods, or to price people out of neighborhoods, or to build up downtown and neglect the neighborhoods, or to put amenities in the city that everyday Detroiters can't access,
Mm-hmm.
right? So um I have a drive to eradicate that, to
Mm-hmm.
help build bridges so that people feel like they're one community. Like, you're not coming to save us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you want to join us, if you want to lock arms with us, come on,
Yeah.
right? But we don't need saving.
Right.
So all of that, I'm proud graduate of Detroit Public Schools, was taught by some of the best musicians,
Mm.
period, bar none. You know, um, Detroit made me, period,
Oh yeah.
period.
Well,
Yeah.
this is cool because the series that we just finished before the Thoughts and Prayers series was called Civic Actors, and it was all
Mm,
about things happening at the local level, global things being addressed at the local level. And we talked about a lot of place of pride and how the work on the block and the work in the neighborhood is so essential to the work of the world. So
absolutely.
that double clicked on all that. I
Hmm.
want to ask you about joy and play and what do you do for fun. You have a fun way about you, so I think everything you do you approach expecting there to be some fun and bringing it if it's not there, but what do you specifically do to kind of give yourself a break, and then how do you bring that into the classroom and the congregation?
Hmm. I am an arts kid. I'm a theater
Mm-hmm.
kid, right? There's shout out to Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, which is still
Mm-hmm.
going strong. I was in the singing group, the touring company of Mosaic. Got to sing for President Bill Clinton,
Whoa.
right? So I'm an artsy kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? Still. And so love going to live concerts. I will see people more than once, and I'm fine with that, right? um, I'm a singer, and so have been in community choirs and in the church choir and leading the song at the beginning of every time I preach. I sing before I preach, right? Um, so music is very important to me. Theater, I've got a couple of theater subscriptions here in Philadelphia. I like to see live theater. Um, I'm also like, I'm a former athlete
Mm-hmm.
and I played basketball. And so going to WNBA games,
Mm.
watching WNBA games, on my bucket list before I die, I would like to coach a girls basketball team.
Ooh.
I just want to be on the coaching staff. I don't need to be the head coach, but I would love, love, love to coach some girls in basketball. So love sports, live sports.
Mhm.
And then I think uh I'm I'm a comic book geek.
Oh, fun.
This developed later in life. Picked up a random comic book, graphic novel, and loved it. And I posted on my social media, y'all, I just read this. It was great. What else can I read? Like I'm interested, and people gave me recommendations. And so I have a whole 2 shelves on my bookcase over here of graphic novels and comic books. It's another way to stimulate imagination, right? Like, no, we actually can have a world where fill in the blank, right?
Yes, yes.
So graphic novel geek. That shows up in my work. I teach a class called uh, Theology, Science Fiction, and Social Revolution.
Ooh. Good stuff.
So we read all of the things, short stories, we watch films, we read graphic novels. Like it satisfies the comic geek in me. And we can still attach it to kind of critical thinking and the academy. But so I teach that. Another course I teach called Do Black Lives Matter to God?
Mm.
First of all, the midterm is students have to write a children's story.
Oh.
And I won't explain the whole assignment here, but students balk. They're like, what is this? Can I just write a paper? And then they give me the most incredible illustrated children's
Oh.
stories. Like I got one time that was animated.
Oh. Wow.
Right? So you can talk about heavy theological concepts in a way that a child would understand, right? That's how you know you got it. You can explain it to a kid.
Yeah.
So that's an assignment. Again, tapping into creativity and play. And then the final for that class is a mock trial.
Mm.
We put God on trial.
Oh, wow.
So the drama of it all, the theater of it all, right? So you bring your theological conundrums, right? Students are like, I know this is fake, but and they have to work through whatever that is to perform this for an audience. We invite an audience, right?
So, Reverend Naomi, like the question I shared with you that I had a few weeks back, I could have brought that to the trial.
Absolutely.
And God, explain to me, how dare you? How could this be? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And the students are lawyers, they're witnesses, they're jury sometimes, right? And so, yeah, that I want to bring that kind of creative expression to any and everything I do, whether it's in the classroom or, at the protest. Let's think of a creative way to use this ritual, right? So yeah, that's my lane right there.
Well, and I'm so, thank you for your service. I'm so grateful that you stand in front of classrooms and congregations as your 2 forms of ministry, because I know what's happening there is you're contributing to the betterment of people that we need out there, right? Doing this work, the ones we'll never meet and the ones that we will get the blessing to meet. This is so fun talking to you. I just loved it. I am so grateful for your work. Grateful what you've shared. You gave us a bunch of great recommendations. We'll get all those up into the show notes, things to watch, things to read, and we will watch what you are up to. Thank you for bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world.
Thank you, Kristine, for having me. What a good time.
I loved it. All right. Blessings. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the PlayFull Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know of a leader or organization that's doing good in the world and you'd love to help us help them amplify their message, I would love to have them on the show. Go go to the show notes and click there, or go to impactfulinc.com/contact. And that's impactful with 2 L's, inc.com/contact. And let us know who you're thinking about. Can't wait to see you next time.